In this video, we're going to solve quadratic equations using this method called the quadratic formula. This formula is probably the second most famous formula in high school math outside of the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. I'll be linking some videos of this formula set to music. It's a pretty classic thing to do, is to memorize this formula by singing it. I will not be doing that, but there are plenty of people that have embarrassed themselves on the internet over the years that have some pretty fantastic renditions, so please check those out. The quadratic formula is this formula we can use to solve any quadratic that's in standard form. Standard form being something ax squared plus bx plus c, where the a, b, and c are numbers that will be filled in. This formula works as long as you've rewritten the quadratic so that it's equal to 0, and that's an important feature to note, that this must be equal to 0. Equal to 0. The quadratic formula is as follows. It's kind of big. It's got it's a big fraction, and it's got a plus or minus symbol in the numerator. So I'm going to try to do my best to write this out. The quadratic formula is as follows: negative b plus or minus square root, and the square root is, under the square root is b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. And again, these letters are the coefficients that come from the original formula, and I've kind of highlighted them here in various colors. Note that this formula also tells two different answers because of this plus or minus. So this is really negative b. One of the answers is negative b plus this square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. And the other answer is negative b and then subtract this square root. So because of this plus or minus symbol, this is really two answers. This is two answers because of the plus or minus. Of the plus or minus symbol. To use this formula, we're going to identify what these values are. Then we're going to substitute them in, and then we'll use a calculator, whether it's the free Inspire calculator you can download to your device. And there's links for that on Canvas and also in prior notes, as well as or you could just use a regular scientific calculator, or like the free calculator you can get by just typing in a calculator into Google. And I'll show you how to use that in a minute. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to use this quadratic formula to solve some problems here. When I have I know it's quadratic because there's an x squared. The biggest x is an x squared term. If I'm going to use the quadratic formula, I just need to identify what the a, the b, and the c are, and then I'll substitute them into this formula. So I think in this particular equation, I think a is whatever is multiplied in front of x squared, which is, in this case, 2. b is whatever is multiplied in front of the x value, which in this case is positive 7. Or it's plus 7, just to remind me. And c is whatever is the constant term, whatever is being added subtracted on the outside, in this case, negative 9. So my quadratic formula tells me that the values should be the following. X should be equal to a big fraction, negative b. Every time I substitute in a value, I'm going to put it in parentheses. So minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And this whole thing is divided by 2 times a. What I recommend you do is you simplify each individual part as best you can. Like I'm going to figure out what minus of b is. I'm going to figure out what's under this square root, and I'm going to figure out what's on the bottom. And then once I have each of those individually simplified, I'm going to type my answers in my calculator. So I think this then tells me, if I do a little bit of simplifying, minus a positive 7 is just minus 7. That one's easy. Let's see, 7 squared is 49 minus 4 times 2 times negative 9. Maybe off the top of my head, not positive. Let's make a new document. I'll make a calculator page. How about 4 times 2 times negative 9? It's negative 72. So minus negative 72. 2 times 2 is 4. It would probably be good to figure out what 49 minus negative 72 is. And we've calculated here 49 minus a negative is plus. That's 121. So this is maybe better written as, well, 121. There are two answers here. Negative 7 plus the square root divided by 4, and negative 7 minus the square root divided by 4. And to kind of minimize my algebra thing going on here, I'm going to type all this in as one big fraction. So I'm going to type in, how about x equals negative 7 plus the square root of 121 over 4. And I'll round my answer to the nearest hundredth. So I'll use my calculator. How about fraction minus 7 plus the square root of 121 divided by 4. And that's a whole number. What do you know? That's 1. Well, it makes sense because the square root of 121 is the whole number 11. So negative 4 plus 11 is 4. I think the other answer I get is x equals minus 7 minus the square root of 121 over 4. And again, you could probably do this in your header a little bit simpler because the square root of 121 is 11. But I will do the same thing. If you have your Inspire downloaded or you have it in your handheld, you can kind of quickly change what you just typed. Note that the only thing I need to do is change this adding sign to a minus sign. So I just hit up twice to highlight what I previously typed, and I'm hitting enter, and it lets me edit what I just had. So rather than type everything from scratch, I'm going to be lazy here, and I'm going to just edit this subtraction, this adding to a minus sign. And that's 9 halves. Minus 9 halves. Or if I do Control, Enter, 9 halves is negative 4.5. So my two solutions are x equals 1 and x equals negative 4.5. Okay, let's try again. I'm going to erase a little bit here so I have some more room to work. The second example here has x equals x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. So I think my values of a, what's a, is whatever is multiplied in front of the x squared. There's nothing here. Well, there really is like a hidden 1. B is whatever is multiplied in front of the x. That's a minus 8. And C is whatever constant terms by itself. It's positive 16. So my quadratic formula tells me plug in a, b, and c, and we get the following. How about x equals minus b? B is negative 8. So minus negative 8 plus minus square root negative 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. And then this whole thing is over 2 times a. A is 1. So let's see, a few things I noticed. minus negative 8 is positive 8. Minus 8 squared. This is negative 8 times negative 8. Two negatives make a positive, which means this is going to be, this when you square b, they always get a positive number. It's a really easy mistake to make is to go along with your calculator and try to do something like minus 8 squared and write negative 64. That is not what you have typed here. What you have is parenthesis minus 8 squared, which is positive 64. So don't make this lazy mistake and try to do negative in here. This is positive 64 minus 4 times 1 times 16. 4 times 1 times 16 is also 64. And this is over 2. Something to notice, 64 minus 64 is 0. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So you actually get, the two answers you get are actually just one and the same. X is 8 plus 0 over 2. X is 8 minus 0 over 2. Adding 0 and subtracting 0 is the same number, so these are going to be the same values. And 8 divided by 2 is the whole number 4. So the two answers are actually just copies of the same one, which is just 4. Couple more. Note that the only difference between this problem, and the problems above are that they are not equal to 0. Before you get started on either of these two problems, we need to rearrange these so they're equal to 0. So rather than this minus 1 on its own, I'm going to add 1 to both sides and get this new equation, 3x squared minus 5x plus 1 equals 0. And now, once I've got it equal to 0, now I'll identify my a, b, and c. If you try to do it beforehand, it will not lead to the correct answer. So this is equal to 0. I think my a is 3, b is minus 5, and c is plus 1. So we get x is equal to negative b minus negative 5 plus minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And all of this is divided by 2a. Maybe this time, when I do my calculations here, I'll use maybe a Google calculator instead of my fancy Inspire. Maybe I didn't have time to download it, or it doesn't work in my Chromebook for some reason or something. So I'll try to do this with a scientific calculator here. So let's see, minus negative 5, I don't need a calculator for that. That's minus negative 5 is positive 5. Let's see, minus 5 squared, minus 5 times minus 5 is 25. 4 times 3 times 1, 4 times 3 is 12. Divided by 2 times a is 3, which is 6. 25 minus 12 is 13, so I need to do x is going to be 5 plus the square root of 13 over 6, and x is equal to 5 minus the square root of 13 over 6. These are not whole numbers, so I'm going to need to figure out how to calculate these as decimals. So I'm going to type in the numerator. I'm going to do, on my scientific calculator, I'm going to do parenthesis, my numerator, 5 plus the square root of 13. Oops, not 15, but 13. Parenthesis for the square root, parenthesis for the numerator, and I just kind of filled in the parentheses over there, and then I'll divide by the denominator, which is 6. Enter. Yeah, so it looks like this first answer is about 1.43 to the nearest hundredths place. And it looks like the second one is about, how about 5 minus the square root of 13, parenthesis, parenthesis, divided by 6. And x is about 0.23. Lastly, here's a similar problem to the rest, but again, this is not equal to 0. I need to rearrange this to be 0. You can gather on either side you want. I always like the leading term to be positive if I can help it, so I'm going to subtract 7x from both sides. And I'm subtract 2 from both sides, so that the right-hand side is 0. 4x squared minus 7x minus 2 equals 0. So a is 4, b is negative 7, c is negative 2. X is minus b minus negative 7 plus minus square root negative 7 squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. So x is equal to 7 plus minus square root of 49 minus 4 times 4 times 2, which is 4 times 4 times minus 2. 4 times 4 times minus 2, which would be negative 32. All divided by 8. 2 times 4 is 8. I'll type this in my calculator. It turns out 49 plus 32 is 81, and the square root of 81 is 9. So this is really 7 plus 9 over 8. 7 plus 9 is 16. 16 divided by 8 is 2. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. It's negative 2 eighths, which is negative 0.25.